The biggest reveal in One Piece is about to happen. I say the biggest, I mean one of the biggest, or at least definitely a reveal on the literal biggest island, because a mystery man is waiting for our straw hats on that there Elbaf, but he is not the only one. But before we get into Big Man, we have Big Bird. I always love checking in with Big News Morgans because he often reflects the readers. Right now, he's going insane, taking in all of the events that have just happened, just like we are. And we're all debating amongst ourselves how everything on Egghead's going to affect the world at large. The difference is that Big News Morgans has this practically godlike power to actually control the narrative of this planet, and therefore this story. And we hear that he's planning on breaking the news of Law versus Blackbeard and Eustace Kid versus Shanks, which on the one hand is expected. It is of course the job of Big Birdman to report on the Big Bird events, but it does make me very curious, as thinking about it, both of those battles took place in near complete isolation. In the case of Law versus Blackbeard, no one from the public were around to witness the event, and in the case of Shanks versus Kid, yeah, there were gazillions of people, but they were all Elbaf natives or part of Shanks's fleet. So I wonder if Morgans may have a spy and or spies, plural, planted into both the red hair and the Blackbeard pirate so that he is always the first bird to get a sweet scoop of bird feed in these obscure situations. And then, as expected, it's about to happen, Morgans is going to turn this entire world against Luffy by publishing that he is the one who killed Dr. Vegapunk. I've been fearing this outcome for quite some time now. We knew that Morgans wasn't going to turn Luffy into a hero ever since the moment he decided to report on the siege, where he painted Luffy as the clear villain. So in order to follow the plot he set up, he needs to do this as well. And this is a perfect example of the unchecked power Big News Morgans has. Because now anyone who doesn't personally know Luffy is going to assume that he is the most evil being in the world who must be stopped at all of the costs, which is probably going to heavily increase support for the Marines and the world government in their pursuit to find the One Piece before he does, because we can't have the bad man doing it. If the bad man finds a thing, then he's going to do bad things. Whereas consider this, if Big News Morgans had decided to say nothing, then all of the pressure would be on the world government right now, because we need answers. What was that message, world government people? Give us answers about the histories and such. But there's no time to be thinking about history when a doomed future is imminent, because Emperor of the Sea, Straw Hat Luffy, has beaten a Marine Admiral, killed Dr. Vegapunk, escaped a Buster Call, and is now potentially mere weeks or even days away from finding the One Piece and plunging everyone and everything into eternal darkness. From the perspective of newspaper readers, Luffy is on the cusp of becoming the next Rocksteady Zebek, a global terrorist who will not rest until he's destroyed all of your buildings, eaten all of your children, and slept with all of your wives. That is the fear that this planet now faces, all thanks to a bird. And I don't usually get chills when I think of Morgans because traditionally he's more so kind of on our side, but when he said that he doesn't care if the world sinks, that painted a horrifying future in my head, where for the sake of an exciting story, Morgans commits his power to ensuring that the world government actually succeed in flooding what's left of existence. An apocalypse is a pretty exciting event after all, and he'd do it as well. He will end existence for the sake of selling a 100 berry newspaper, which is, by the way, an insanely cheap price considering the cost of everything else in the One Piece world. And you know, something that's always blown my mind is the price of a full course meal at Baratier, which is 13,000 berries. Absolutely absurd. For the same price, you could have like 87 cabbages at 150 berries a pop each, although they would be 15,000 extol each on Skypiea due to the exchange rate. But you didn't think about that, did you? Because finance is boring and complicated, and we just want to see rubber men punching other non-rubber men. Well, hold your horses, you .qu, because Revolut is here to revolutionize how you do money. Revolut is a global super money app already used by over 45 million people worldwide, and lots of other fun marketing words, but I'm going to keep this real simple. Revolut has made my financial experience so much easier and simpler, allowing me to spend, save, and send with a virtual card accessible via Apple or Google Pay, or even a customizable physical card allowing me to do all of the above, all of the anywhere. I genuinely use this card more than my regular debit card now, and right now if you sign up to Revolut, you'll get a $30 bonus. Just head to this link thing below to learn more. But it also acts as a handy on-the-spot currency exchange tool. Incredibly useful for me because running a YouTube channel about fictional pirates is surprisingly complicated when it comes to finances, as I have artists and editors in New York, London, Panama, India, and the Philippines. So Revolut is very much my go-to to solve these issues because they offer low fees, a comparatively nice exchange rate, and it's so much much easier to just keep track of everything from the singular hub. So the word super in Super Money app is not being used lightly here, because this 5-star rated app is an anchor that has simplified my entire financial existence. And don't forget, Revolut is offering a $30 welcome reward when you join today. And you can check it out yourself through my link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. And thank you so much to Revolut for sponsoring this video, as it's because of supporters like them that we're able to bring you the best fictional pirate content possible as often as possible. So check them out, but for now, it's back to you. Me. And then we have poor rotund Sentomaru. I'm very happy to see him alive and I guess relatively well, but Sentomaru sailing away from Egghead Island is the saddest solo boat journey I've seen since Child Robin sailed away from Ohara. And the big question for Sentomaru now is, where exactly does he go from here? Uncharacteristically, we know a lot more about this region of the planet than most, because the Egghead arc has been pretty precise with all of its surrounding locations. And if you're setting sail from Egghead, there aren't many options, one of which is a marine base, which probably not a good idea after all of your betrayal, Sentomaru. But one very fun option might be for Sentomaru to find his way to Wano. He'd probably fit right in, he already has that very ye olde Japanese vibe happening, and it could be a good vehicle for a cover story centered on him. Like how when we followed Capone Gang Beige and he backtracked to Dressrosa. That was fun. But what are his other options right now? I guess he could come to Elbaf with us, just, much slower. Well, there's Winter Island, which I don't remember anything at all. Is there anything on Winter Island? Just a lot of very phallic-shaped rocks. But in a complete reversal of the previous situation where everyone was standing and Kizaru was on the floor, now we have everyone else on the floor whilst Kizaru is standing. Yet another mind-blowing twist that Oda throws at us on a weekly basis. Who's gonna be standing and who's gonna be lying down next week? I, man on the internet, cannot tell you. No one can predict these things. I have to say though, this chapter gave me exactly what I wanted from Kizaru, which is a solid statement on where he lands emotionally after all of the horrendous acts he's committed on this island in the name of justice. And he gets a full-on Oda cry panel with nose drippings and everything. Something I never expected to see from Kizaru, or in fact any admiral. They're always so stoic and firm of mind. And I do feel a bit bad because I have given Kizaru a lot of crap week to week during this arc, and he's become a bit of an egghead meme on this channel. But knowing where he stands, I think it's going to be quite difficult to go back and reread this arc with the knowledge of how much he's struggling with this mission. This chapter has very much changed my view of him. Previously, my assessment was that he was a man who had been beaten down by the system. He knew what he was doing was wrong, but he did it anyway because the system had eroded his will. All that was left was a walking function. But now I see him as a man who was pursuing justice in his own unclear way. He's not the unfeeling shell that I've characterized him as, and if anything, he is so driven by justice that he's had to violently break every moral barrier presented to him for the sake of making what is in his mind a better world. I see him more along the same lines as I see Sakazuki now, because what Kizaru did here is very absolute justice, but here is the key difference between them. The key difference is certainty. Sakazuki does horrible things, but he does so with the certainty that this is the correct path. Whether or not that's actually true in reality doesn't matter, it's certain in his head. Whereas Kizaru, he will commit those same acts hoping that it's the correct path, but not quite knowing for sure. Hence why it's unclear justice. The flashback with Vegapunk was short but fantastic, if only to see all of Kizaru's funky outfits across time. And look, if I didn't know any better, I'd say that Kizaru was far more interested in pursuing fashion than justice, but this chapter proves that very wrong. And it's not just that Vegapunk was his friend, apparently this relationship went beyond that. Kizaru calls Vegapunk his best friend, and I don't know how to feel about that. My first question would be if Vegapunk knows that Kizaru thinks about him this way, because I always got the impression that Vegapunk considered Kizaru more of a work colleague, someone to keep at arm's length. And it makes me want to know more about Kizaru because he feels like a very lonely man to me. The kind of guy who doesn't really have a lot of friends outside of work, although he does have a brother in Sakazuki, which was a surprisingly intimate bond revealed in this chapter, one that you first catch a glimpse of when Sakazuki calls Kizaru by his real name Borsalino instead of his admiral epithet. But we should examine this thoroughly because English is not good enough to convey the nuance of this conversation. I think most people watching this are probably familiar with the term aniki, which translates as older brother, but it's not generally used to mean an actual biological brother. It's an honorable term that you use for someone that you consider a superior. For example, Johnny and Yosaku refer to Zoro as aniki always, incessantly, it's all they say. However, that is not the word that Sakazuki uses here. The exact word that Sakazuki uses is kyodai, meaning sibling, and this can actually refer to biological siblings, but given Sakazuki's Yakuza theming, it's more likely that he's using it to describe a sworn brother. which is important because this implies a more balanced relationship, like Luffy, Ace, and Sabo. They refer to each other as Kyodai, a trio of sworn brothers. And with this dynamic, it's also interesting to linger on the fact that Kizaru is 3 years older than Sakazuki. So even though Sakazuki outranks him as the fleet admiral, there is a certain level of reverence that Sakazuki pays Kizaru as his elder. And I just find this scene fascinating because it offers such a rarely seen insight into Sakazuki's inner workings. He's not just a man willing to commit every crime ever invented and even invent some new creative original ones, all for the sake of justice. He's not just that. Sakazuki is a man of honor and he treats his bonds very seriously, which is something we also saw with Kuzan when he was explaining the Battle of Punk Hazard to Blackbeard. Kuzan spoke about how this fight genuinely pained Sakazuki because he considered Kuzan a close comrade. You know what really makes me think though? Sakazuki understands what Kizaru is saying. Kizaru asks Sakazuki if he's ever had to kill his best friend, and Sakazuki doesn't say no. In fact, he responds terrifyingly empathetically. Remember that this is Sakazuki, big angry lava man, and he generally does not respond to emotional pleas, like that guy at Marineford who deserted the battlefield because he was afraid for the future of his family. Sakazuki just up and killed him. There was no empathy there whatsoever, but here there is. It's almost like maybe Sakazuki has killed his best friend in the past, or at least an incredibly close comrade, or even a family member, because he immediately backs the F off and apologizes. And that in and of itself is huge, because this operation is one of the greatest failures that the Marines have ever endured, and Sakazuki is the one apologizing. Also, we need to talk about Saint Saturn, or the lack thereof, Saint Saturn, because he's now been absent for 2 whole chapters and potentially for the foreseeable future, because I don't know how much business we still have to deal with on Egghead. It feels like we're leaving it behind, and it looks like Oda is gearing up to toss us straight onto Elbaf. But mate, I need to know what happened to this old man. Catching up with the Straw Hats, we have a trio left on the Thousand Sunny whilst everyone else is with the Giants, and I love this combination. We have Zoro, Jinbei, and Frankie, and here's why these 3 were picked. Firstly, Jinbei is the helmsman, so he can't just up and abandon ship to party with some giants. But what I love is that this shows the trust that the crew and particularly Nami have in Jinbei, because otherwise I feel like she would need to remain on board to navigate. Frankie is also present because he's the ship technicianman and also part of a skeleton crew whose role can't easily be replaced. And then we have Zoro, who's staying with the Sunny in case someone really strong rocks up to fight battle, which is possible. As far as they know, there's an entire marine fleet and 5 old monsters chasing them. But whilst waiting for the potential of that, Zoro has some words to say. This is a very Zoro thing to hold Luffy to his status, and it's something that we most notably saw when Usopp left the crew on Water 7. Zoro was firm but fair with Luffy about his role as a captain, and it's something we also saw in Punk Hazard when Zoro chastised Luffy about messing around in the New World. Zoro consistently holds Luffy to his status, in this case now being an Emperor of the Sea. And the more status Luffy gains, the more Zoro wants him to stop effing about. So what we have here in his mind is the life of one old dude set against one of the 4 most influential pirates in the world. What he's missing though is that in this case, Luffy made a promise. And no matter how big or small that promise was, failure is unacceptable. Luffy doesn't see his status in the same way that Zoro does, and from Luffy's perspective, saying things like, "I'll get you off this island alive, old man," and "I'm the man who's going to become the pirate king," carry equal weight. And if he can't keep his word on the first statement, then it seriously jeopardizes faith in the latter, which is why it is incredibly important that this chapter goes on to establish that Luffy did technically keep his word, because if he doesn't, then it undermines everything he's been working towards, and it triggers another Ace situation where Luffy begins to seriously doubt himself. But because that's not happening here, we've already done that long ago, Oda takes this opportunity to go for a joke that I love, where Chopper says that Luffy, he's so depressed that he's only managed to eat 5 bunches of giant grapes. It's so good. But in essence, all of the Vegapunks still live on within Lilith, and there's a part of the chapter where it looks like Lilith is being spoken to or processing the information that she wasn't conscious for, sort of like an update being installed. And I do wonder, now that she's the last surviving Vegapunk apart from York, let's not talk about York, traitorous vixen, I wonder if Lilith isn't just the aspect of evil anymore, and if she is quite literally hearing the voices of everyone else, thus truly becoming Vegapunk by combining every other aspect back into one vessel, all except for greed, which turned out to be the one key flaw in Vegapunk's personality. And so what we now have in Lilith could be a perfected Vegapunk, one that is now free of what little corrupting influence of greed there was within him, and a being truly capable of bringing Vegapunk's dreams into reality. And just like that, Egghead Island has a surprisingly happy ending for the Straw Hats, and we even get the customary crew toast, which I think is Jinbei's first official crew toast and the one we've been waiting for since Luffy put it on hold and then just never got back to it during Wano. So even though it's not strictly in Jinbei's honor, here it is, I guess. And during this part, there's a great moment with Chopper and Robin where she's squeezing the life out of him and saying that she might be able to see Saul, which is something that I'm very much looking forward to. But you've got Chopper there just like, that's great, Robin. Please stop squeezing me. And I have to wonder if Chopper has any idea who she's talking about, because do the Straw Hats actually know Robin's backstory and that sort of detail? Most of the flashbacks we see are told to the Straw Hats by someone else, but Robin's just sort of played out while everyone was standing on buildings. So I'd like to think that Chopper is just humoring Robin, hoping that she'll release her clutch of doom. But going back a bit, one of the very small big things that I really love about this section is seeing the full couch and just how non-existent Lilith and the Straw Hats are sitting on it. I mean, they needed a huge ladder just to get up there. This is a taste of what's to come on Elbaf. Wano may have been our longest journey, but Elbaf is definitely going to be our biggest. Oda is going to go wild with scale in ways that he's never been able to do before. And I absolutely cannot wait for the artistic insanity that's going to ensue. And in true Oda fashion, we can't end a chapter on a break without some sort of cliffhanger, which is given to us in the form of an Elbaf silhouette. It would appear that someone is waiting for the crew to arrive, which makes sense because the giants were sent to go pick them up. And it's not Saul, at least I seriously doubt that it's Saul. And judging by the hat, I would say that hopes are quite high that this person could solve one of the most enduring mysteries in One Piece, which is exactly who the crap Crocus was talking to on the cover of chapter 631. The figure here is wearing a classic Wano Amigasa, which is why many of us thought that this figure was going to be from Wano, or at least reside on Wano and going to be revealed during that arc. But that didn't happen, and there really aren't many people left in this world that this could be. Given how friendly this figure was with Crocus, my first thought would be Scopper Gaban, because they were both on the same crew and everything. And I say this even though the hair color doesn't match, because that doesn't matter. Something to keep in mind is that the official digitally colored manga makes a lot of guesses with color schemes that are later confirmed to be different by Oda, like Kahira from the Revolutionary Army, who had quite a radical color shift recently. So I wouldn't take the blonde hair as an indicator of anything at this stage. But you let me know in the comments who you think this figure is, and we'll dive into the other insane possibilities in the next video.